Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. Common NCHEF here with Tom Castleman and Drew Brackett. Originally, our lead story was going to be college basketball, conference tournaments, and our picks. But boy, the NFL had something else to say about that. Breaking news today, Aaron Rodgers staying put in Green Bay after a big contract. Russell Wilson on the move to the Broncos, a blockbuster trade. We'll talk all about that early on in the show, but plenty of basketball later on in the program. Looking forward to yet another fun show. Drew and Tom, glad to be here.
Yeah, of course, March Madness has begun with a massive buzzer beater in the conference championships. We'll be talking about the Power 5 conferences as well as some NBA as well. We've got some history coming up with one of my favorite coaches of all time, as well as that ever egocentric scoring title as well. So lots of stuff to talk about on the show today.
Absolutely. We'll start with the NFL news, as Common alluded to. We'll start with Russell Wilson. He got traded to the Broncos earlier. It was a lot that the Broncos gave up for him. Who do you think wins this trade in the long run, Common?
Yeah, so the Broncos agreed to trade our former Mizzou guy, Drew Lock, a guy that I covered in college, a guy I personally know, a really good guy, a really talented player, but not a guy that's delivered in the NFL. So Broncos traded Drew Lock, the quarterback, tight end Noah Fant, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and the 5th-round pick to the Seahawks for Russell Wilson and a 4th-round pick. Sources saying. So obviously, the Broncos gave up a whole bunch, but I think that in the end of the day, I think it was worth it. As much as I like Drew Lock, as much as I think he can benefit from a change of scenery, Drew Lock is not Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is a top 5 quarterback in the game. He can pass well. He can run well. He throws a beautiful deep ball. He keeps the interceptions down. He hasn't been hurt his whole career, so he was due for 1 injury this last season, due for 1 season under 500. Drew Lock is not a long-term NFL starter, and these 1st and 2nd round picks, we get so caught up in picks. These are not guarantees. These guys are not necessarily going to be great. Chances are they probably miss on those picks. So I think when you have a top 5 quarterback, you need to get him, and you got to think about your roster. The Broncos were one of the top defensive teams in the league this last season. Vic Fangio, who got fired, who was a former Bears DC, he said we're a quarterback away. And they got their quarterback. And they have talent there. Jerry Jeudy at receiver, Cortland Sutton at receiver. I mean, Noah Fant doesn't hurt them that much. He wasn't that great this last season. I didn't even know who Shelby Harris was. I had to look up who that was. So that tells you enough. So to me, obviously, it is a fair trade because they gave up a ton of guys. But long-term, I think this was a great move for the Seahawks. You got to get the quarterback. Without the quarterback in the NFL, you have no chance in the modern passing game, modern passing league. I mean, every year, the team in recent years who wins the Super Bowl, elite quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady. This last year, Matthew Stafford. I mean, we saw how good the Rams were. They needed a quarterback. They went out and got one. So I think this is a great move for the Seahawks. They knew they were going to give up a lot, or the Broncos, excuse me, but they did it, and they got their guy. Big fan of the move out in Denver. And by the way, Rodgers was rumored to go there. We'll talk about Rodgers and the Packers a little bit later, but not a bad consolation prize in Russell Wilson.
No, not at all. And especially when you have, I mean, it seems like every quarterback on the aging side of 30 says this, but Wilson's saying that he would really like to play into his 40s. And with the way that sports medicine is working now, quarterbacks and just athletes in general have more at their disposal to make that dream, that wish a reality. So really, Denver's locking in a quarterback just pretty much right in line with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert in Kansas City and in LA. To basically give them a shot to look at that roster that's a quarterback away. I mean, the thing that kind of bums me out the most about this is that this comes after the Broncos fired Vic Fangio, one of, coach defense for the Bears, one of my favorite defensive coordinators.
Sure.
Certainly didn't seem like he had enough support resource-wise on the offensive side of the ball. Had Denver pretty much consistently decent, but like you said, Common, like always that quarterback away. And yeah, they gave up a lot. I think that it's actually a pretty decent haul for Seattle to kind of like take their side of it really quickly, because they're getting the 9th overall pick in the draft, which is where you can get a difference maker. And looking at that Seattle roster, they need lots of difference makers everywhere. I mean, now this opens up, does DK Metcalf go on the move? Because he can fetch you some stuff as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see where Seattle's going to end up. I think they kind of looked at San Francisco being really good, Arizona being really good, LA, the Rams, of course, being really good, and said, you know what, we're going to take a couple years. We're going to reload because we're not going to be able to do it with Russell Wilson and what we currently have. Interesting that Denver's kind of taking the opposite tack, where they're looking at, Mahomes, Herbert, probably thinking these guys aren't going anywhere for like a decade plus. So we may as well try to run with them with the guys that we got. And like you outlined with their roster, I think they're in a really, really good position to do so. And I think we're going to see a ton of great football on CBS coming up this season and into the future.
Nice of you to say CBS and not Amazon. But yeah, I think it's a great move.
Yeah, that hasn't been announced. Yeah.
Great move for
Amazon just Thursday, I think, right?
It is.
Okay.
But I mean, Apple just got some Major League Baseball rights if they ever play. So that's interesting. What won't happen?
Baseball playing.
Oh, baseball playing one.
Eventually they'll play.
Yes, we'll see. But anyway, I think it's a great move for the Broncos, and they did give up a few items, but I think they got Von Miller back. I saw him tweet out a picture of himself in a Bronco jersey. So, it could be a let's win it this year kind of season for them.
Yeah, and I think to be said, like, obviously, I think the Broncos did win the trade, but I want to say this is a trade that works for both sides. As you said, Tom, as good as Russell Wilson is, given that division, Seattle was not in a position where they were going to win the division. And obviously Russell was unhappy there. And it doesn't help when you have an unhappy player. So this is one of those trades that I think the Broncos obviously got by far the best asset. So to me, they win the trade. But this is one of those trades where both sides kind of win, because I think Seattle is getting themselves a pretty good haul. So it's a trade that works out for both. Where does this put the Broncos? Go ahead, Tom. You're going to say something. But my question was, are the Broncos like a Super Bowl contender? Are they a division winner, a wild card? I mean, where does this put them now with Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I'll circle back on a thought I had for Seattle that I kind of saw floating around on the interwebs. I think this puts Denver squarely in like division winning territory, right? Like they can't make this move and not have that be the expectation going forward. They're looking at, a young, talented receiver core. I think Cortland Sutton's 26, Jerry Jeudy's like 22, 23, and even Tim Patrick at 28. They have enough weapons, I think, to be able to go out there and say, hey, our defense is going to be able to slow up, make a stop here or there against Kansas City, because that's all defenses are really capable of doing at this point of the NFL.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think Denver definitely has to go out there and say, no, we're division contenders, and certainly can still grab a wild card spot. With that extra wild card spot, that's actually something that just popped in my head. With that extra wild card spot now, if that's going to be sticking around long term, yeah, you have no reason to not go for it, because all you have to do is get into the playoffs. We saw both of the 1 seeds lose in their first game after having the bye, so you just have to get in basically, and that's what Denver's in a good position to do.
Drew, what do you think?
I mean, I think if I'm the Broncos, obviously Super Bowl, right? I mean, you got to get through Kansas City and the Chargers, but yeah, I think they could turn this into a really good team this year.
Yeah, so I'm going to go a little bit different than you guys. First off, as Tom said, he brings up a great point. All you got to do is get in the show, because the NFL is wide open. There's not one team that I look at that I say that team is clearly the best team in the league. We had 2 4 seeds in the Super Bowl this last year. So the Broncos, all they got to do is get in the playoffs, and they get on a run, they can win. So Russell Wilson obviously has already won the Super Bowl. He's played in a couple Super Bowls. He's got that experience. So it's a great move for them. However, I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit. I think they're still clearly the second team in that division. I think a wild card is realistic. I think they'll get a wild card, but the Chiefs are still the class of the AFC. I know the Bengals had an upset run. I know they beat them in the playoffs, but Kansas City has been in 4 straight AFC championships. They've been in 2 of the last 4 Super Bowls. They won a Super Bowl very recently. In fact, they were the last AFC team to win the Super Bowl, and they completely own Denver. They have completely dominated Denver in recent years. I know they dominate everyone, but Denver even more so. So I think right now, the Denver is still, to me, not a distant second. They're close. They're in the discussion. But to me, they're still a clear number 2 in that division. I do think this puts them above the Raiders. It puts them above the Chargers. And it gets them in a position where if they're healthy, they should win a wild card spot. And they should probably win their wild card game, depending on matchup. So I think for them, a realistic goal, especially in season 1, is to make the playoffs, win a playoff game. And then I still think they need a couple more pieces. I do think they have good, young, talented players. Don't get me wrong. I like Jerry Jeudy. I like Cortland Sutton. But compared to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, they're not as good. And as good as Russell Wilson is, he's not as good as Patrick Mahomes. So I still think, to me, their best case scenario is a wild card. But, if injuries happen, they make a run. They can make things happen. I do think Super Bowl is a little bit optimistic. I mean, this is a team that hasn't made the playoffs much in recent years. I mean, they've been under 500 for years in a row. I know they have a lot of pieces. They have the defense, as we said. Russell is a clear upgrade, but I don't think one player typically takes you from not in the playoffs to a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I mean, we talk about Matthew Stafford and what he did with the Rams. Let's not forget that Jared Goff took the Rams to the Super Bowl. The Rams were a playoff team the year before. So the Rams weren't that far away when they brought Stafford in. The Broncos, albeit a young, talented team, albeit a good defense, I think they're a little bit further away than the Rams were. So I'm not ready to put them as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. They've got a shot. You get in the dance, you have a shot. But if I were listing my top 5 favorites to win the Super Bowl next year, Denver would not be in my top 5 favorites personally.
Well, I mean, certainly to a lesser degree, but in the same ballpark. I mean, look at Tampa Bay, what they did with Tom Brady. Like, yeah, they also had to bring in Leonard Fournette and Rob Gronkowski, but those guys were kind of like unknown knowns at that point, or known unknowns at that point. So I kind of think like this is, obviously Russell Wilson's not Tom Brady, but it's kind of in the same vein of like you can have a really good roster that didn't make the playoffs before and then just absolutely own the next year. I think it'll probably look a lot similar to that first year in Tampa as well, where maybe regular season, they kind of like struggle a little bit because they all kind of have to gel a little bit. But I don't know, I'm kind of leaning a little bit with Drew on this one. Or like if I were to list top 5 Super Bowl contenders, Denver, they'd probably be at the bottom of that list.
They'd be on my outside looking in. I still think the Chiefs, the Rams, the Bills are my top 3. You got to throw the Packers in there, and probably whatever team that Brady ends up playing on, whether it's the Bucs or 49ers.
He's coming back.
He's coming back. And the Bengals, by the way, the Bengals draft a good offensive lineman. They're right in the discussion for being a Super Bowl contender. So we'll see. It's very, very wide open, though. I do think that without question, the Broncos are not far off from a top 5 contender. I mean, like we said this before, the 9th best team and the 4th best team in the NFL, the gap is not very big. But I still think, though, even those Bucs teams you mentioned, again, I like Cortland Sutton, I like Jerry Jeudy, but those guys also are not Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, and Gronk. I think, and as good as Russell Wilson is, he's not Tom Brady either. So I see your comparison, but I think the talent level is a little bit lower with the Broncos than what the Bucs had. And these guys they brought in, Gronk, Antonio Brown, Leonard Fournette, I mean, those were proven players. We're talking about unproven players on the Broncos. We're more focusing on talent. So I think you guys are hyping them up just a little bit more than you should. But if things go the best they can, they do have a shot. I mean, the league is wide open. I just think a little too much love for Denver from you two guys. Just a little bit.
I think once we do like a preseason show next year, we'll have Drew key up Why Can't We Be Friends as I pick the Broncos to win the division over the Chiefs in a very nice full circle times a flat circle.
Yeah, we had, of course, our college radio show when the Broncos did make a move for a quarterback. Last time they made one, I had Denver probably winning it all, and they did pretty good with Peyton Manning. They did make the Super Bowl. Tom didn't have them, winning the division. He had the Chiefs. I was right with Denver. Maybe this time around we flop teams and we make it happen. We'll definitely see. It'll be fun to track. I mean, Tom, you've been talking about the NBA ad nauseum the last few weeks, all this drama they create with trades and free agency.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the NFL's like, hey, we got some drama too. And Russell Wilson is just the start of the talk, Drew. We have more drama coming out today in the NFL.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers staying with the Packers. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I had a quick speculative thing.
Sure.
Pete Carroll's 70 years old, and for all intents and purposes, he's still going to be the head coach for Seattle, and I don't really see a rebuild being, fitting into his time frame. I saw this floated on the internet. So what do you guys think about this? The Seahawks have reloaded to then go and trade for Deshaun Watson. Like, that could very well be in the offing.
I can see it because Deshaun Watson was being rumored to the Broncos, by the way, too. So I can see Deshaun Watson. And Deshaun Watson, if he plays at the level we did the last few years, is every bit as good as Russell Wilson. Mm-hmm. They're right on that same level. Deshaun Watson, by the way, Tom, tied for second in career passer rating. It's Mahomes number one, then it's Rodgers and Watson tied for second, and Russell Wilson's not far behind. You may look that up, but I feel like he's also in the top 5 or around that ballpark area as well. So that would be definitely dramatic to see. And then we'd have the AFC West quarterbacks with obviously Mahomes. We'd have Wilson, Justin Herbert. We'd have Carr. And then in the NFC, we'd have Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray, and then obviously whoever the Niners get, which is likely Tom Brady, according to what I think is going to happen. And then you get Deshaun Watson too. We'll talk about the two West. What quarterback has the best, what division has the best quarterbacks? Because I'm calling it now. Tom Brady's going to the Niners. Just remember that. March 8th, 5:34 on Salute Your Sports on a Tuesday. International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to all the ladies out there.
Yeah, agree with that. But I don't agree with Tom Brady unretiring. I think he's definitely done for at least a year. He needs a break after all the hits that he's taken.
The wife wants him to retire. Brady wants to play. He wants to sacrifice for his family, but the itch to play, he's
family
coming
is going to win over the itch to play, guaranteed.
I'm not so sure. And I don't know that he can afford to take an year off because he's really old. His deal would be one more year, one more run. I don't think if he takes a year off, then he's probably not coming back. But who knows? We'll see. Let's talk about the other big number 12 quarterback in the NFL, right, Drew?
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron Rodgers reportedly going back with the Packers. He did confirm it, actually. And then he actually said the terms were, 4 years, $200 million is what was reported. He said that's not accurate. So who knows what the terms are. But the big news, Rodgers to the Packers, back with the Packers, I should say. What do you think, Common?
Well, I don't know the exact terms of that money, but whether it's $50 million a year or not, I mean, it was reported that it was not only 4 years, $200 million, $153 million guaranteed. It seems like those figures might be off by a little bit, but I'm willing to bet that they're not off by a lot because Patrick Mahomes is the richest guy per year at $45 million. Josh Allen at $43, I believe, is the second highest paid quarterback on a per year basis. Rodgers, Tom, how old is he now? How old is Rodgers now?
36, I want to say.
36. So 4 years, he'll be 40. And you know what? I think it's a great deal for the Packers. I think that quarterbacks play until an older age. 4 years is just the right amount. I figure that's about what he has left in his prime. They're going to let him go for another 4 years, and they're going to see what happens. I mean, Rodgers is second all-time in career passer rating. He's won MVP the last 2 seasons. The real shame for them, though, is that they drafted Jordan Love in the first round, had to pay him first-round money, and now he's going to sit on the bench for, 5-6 seasons? I mean, they're going to trade him. He'll be trade bait. but they essentially wasted a first-round pick. And now whatever the contract is for Rodgers, they're going to pay him a boatload of money, and that's going to be harder to get other guys. And I believe, did they franchise tag Devontae Adams? What was the final call?
Yes,
So
they did.
They put the franchise tag on him, so they'll be paying him a bunch of money this year. Probably going to get a long-term deal done with him just because Favre loves to target Adams. That's like peanut butter and jelly.
Rodgers does.
Rodgers
not
does.
Favre.
I'm losing my mind. Rodgers does. So I think if Rodgers stays, they're going to get Mr. Adams long-term. I think that Rodgers can play a little bit better in some of the bigger playoff games. He didn't play great against the Niners. Obviously, back-to-back playoff losses at home doesn't look great. But back-to-back MVPs looks great. And just like the Wilson situation, in order to win a ring in the modern-day NFL, now back in the day, you can win with the defense and a running game. Jamal Lewis, the Ravens defense, Ray Lewis, they could win with Trent Dilfer. Brad Johnson could win a Super Bowl back in the day. But in the modern day game with the passing, you got to have a quarterback. And I think the Packers were not going to get a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I listed Mahomes and Josh Allen. Those guys are locked down to long-term deals. They're obviously younger players. So those are the guys I'd most want. But outside of those guys, I mean, Rodgers is just as good, if not better than them. And those guys are not on the market. So you're not going to get a better quarterback to give you a better chance to win. And unlike the Seahawks, who were in a position where they were going to battle for a playoff spot, the Packers are a playoff team. They need to get better pieces that aren't Rodgers to be a Super Bowl team. But there was no better options than keeping your quarterback. And they definitely lucked out in this situation because it really did look like the Packers may not hold on to Rodgers. Now, I don't know how much of that was him. That might have been him sort of looking for attention and garnering that respect and earning more money in that light. But I think it's a great move for Green Bay. Anytime a guy wins 2 straight MVPs, pay him whatever he wants because he is worth it. Great move for the Packers. Unfortunately for us Bear fans, Tom, looks like he's going to continue owning the Bears. And my thought of Justin Fields becoming the best quarterback in the division once we got rid of Stafford, got rid of Rodgers, and, who knows with Cousins, that's not going to happen. Rodgers will be the king of the NFC North, and the Bears will be owned by Rodgers a few years longer, 4 years longer, if he stays.
Mm-hmm. See, I'm taking a little bit different attack to the news of Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay, and that is this is just one mountain that Justin Fields is going to have to climb. I mean, going full-on Chicago sports nostalgia here, Jordan had to overcome the Pistons in the early 90s to seize greatness. And that's going to be the challenge in front of the Bears is they have to seize greatness. They have to overcome Aaron Rodgers. Enough about that team because they're not the ones making the moves. This is pretty much the only move that Green Bay really could make that was a viable one. I mean, looking around the NFC with Brady retiring, and I'm withdrawing this one. I don't think he's coming back. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think that he's going to be coming back. The NFC, I mean, like, what teams look really, really daunting? You look at the NFC South, you don't really have a ton of, outstanding teams there now that Brady's gone. Same thing with the East. The North as a division, nothing really proven. So for Green Bay, it made 110,000% to make sure that they kept Rodgers in Green Bay. And they did it in a way, of course, that I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the cap for last season and this season is down comparatively to the rate at which it was rising, in large part because of the COVID pandemic. We don't know what the cap's going to be in 2023 and beyond, but clearly a lot of teams around the league are expecting there to be a big boom. So even if these terms aren't exactly what you were saying, Drew, as far as 4 years, $200 million, it's going to be structured in a way where the Green Bay Packers are going to be able to continue to make moves to try to win now, to try to further burnish Aaron Rodgers' legacy, and not even really have to pay for it all that much. It's not going to be that stringent on them in future years because there's just going to be a huge influx of money. Legalized gambling is going to bring in a lot more money. And now that we're going to have cheeks back in the seats, so to speak, ticket revenue concessions are going to be up as well. So yeah, this was the only move for Green Bay to make. As like you said, Common, they're immediately Super Bowl contenders by virtue of, NFC not that great.
Real quickly before I get Drew's take on it, I just want to say one thing, Tom. Your comparison of Justin Fields and Michael Jordan equals what I did in college with Drew when I compared Paula and
Paula and
Padilla to Michael
Padilla,
Jordan.
of course.
As much as I like Justin Fields, as hopeful as I am for him, it is a much, much different situation.
Oh, for sure.
Comparing Jordan. I know you're making it sort of like in fun. I know you don't genuinely believe the comparison, but I just want to say that Justin Fields is nowhere near Michael Jordan. So, and Aaron Rodgers is arguably even greater than the Pistons. I guess the Packers aren't because the Pistons were winning title games, but I got to say that comparison was a little
it's purely on the story narrative.
I know you love the
hero's
stories.
arc.
Tom likes contracts.
It's the hero's arc.
Yeah. What do you think about this whole Aaron Rodgers deal, Drew?
I'm kind of surprised he went back to Green Bay. It's cold up there. I guess he just likes to be cold. I would have definitely gone to somewhere else, but it sounds like they're going to give him enough money or whatever. But yeah, I think they'll be contenders as they usually are. I don't think it changes much.
Yeah, I think the interesting rumor was that I had heard, and again, emphasis on the rumor because obviously it didn't come true. There was talk about Rodgers going to Tampa to replace Brady there. That would have been warmer weather, probably better taxes too as well for Mr. Aaron. But I gotta say, they still need some pieces. Green Bay, he carries them in the regular season. He kind of like covers them some issues. I think they got a great number one receiver. They got a great running back. I do think their defense needs work, and he still needs a legitimate number two. And the one question mark with them, all this money going to Rodgers and Adams, like it should. Those are your two best players. I don't know. They're still a piece or two away before. I mean, they're a contender by having Aaron Rodgers, but are they like the contender? Again, maybe in the top five like the Broncos, at the bottom of the top five, but I still don't buy them as much as maybe two or three other teams to be Super Bowl champs. They got to prove it in the playoffs. And the crazy thing for the Packers, as great as Brett Favre was, as great as Aaron Rodgers is, as hard as it is to win a championship, they only had 2 championships with those two guys as their quarterbacks. So they got to get it together because you need a quarterback to win, as we've seen, but the quarterback also needs help, as we saw with Mr. Matthew Stafford this last season. So they still need a couple pieces before they're going to win the Super Bowl, unless injuries and everything falls right for them,
Oh, definitely. And we'll move on to the Combine comment. I know you were heavily into that. What stood out for you as it ended?
Yeah, so I was not really into the Combine. I know you're making that as a joke, but for our listeners and viewers, I think the Combine is overrated. I think how you do in pads, how you do in little spaces when guys are pressuring you in your face, they're trying to tackle you. It is much different than how you do running in shorts and how you do jumping in shorts, throwing in shorts, etc. With that said, though, there was one takeaway I had from the Combine, and that is that speed is here. Athletes keep getting better across all sports, and we saw it in the Combine. We had 8 receivers run sub 440 times. That tied the most sub 40 times by receivers in the history of the Combine. And then we had the second fastest time ever while the Combine's been around since 2003, I believe. That was Baylor's Kalen Barnes, the cornerback. The defensive back had the fastest defensive time, second fastest overall time ever, 4.23. John Ross was 4.22 in 2017. Now, John Ross, the fastest guy before that, didn't equate to a great player. Michael Vick, Chris Johnson, guys that have been fast, did become great players. So obviously, the game isn't one with just speed, route running like Jerry Rice, the best ever. He wasn't the fastest. He was a great route runner. But what this tells me, though, of those 8 receivers running those insane speeds, at least 1 or 2 of them is going to hit. So some of them may not hit, but it tells me you have a lot of speed in the NFL and a lot of athleticism, the most we've ever seen. And that's because of the training, the medicine, all that Tom has talked about and I've talked about the last few weeks. So speed kills. That's the one thing that stands out with the NFL Combine.
Absolutely. Tom, anything to add?
Not really. No, I didn't pay all that much attention to the combine because, as you said, Common, it's what matters on the game tape and everything. It's another data point for teams as we're kind of getting into mock draft season with the NFL draft coming up in April. We'll kind of see how things start shaking out, especially now that we're going to have the league year starting up in just a couple of weeks. Free agency, that's when all these trades are going to become official, all these contract extensions. We'll see how this kind of fits in with how everything else is going to be rolling into the season starting up really soon.
Calvin Ridley situation before we wrap up with the NFL.
Yes.
I know, Tom, you wanted to address this. What are your thoughts on Calvin Ridley? And correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that Calvin Ridley placed 1,500 total bets on a bunch of parlays, a bunch of them.
$1,500.
$1,500, correct, on several separate parlay bets. There was one at least that involved the Falcons, maybe more.
3 of them did.
3 of them. So all 3 involved the Falcons, his team. Ridley, of course, was sitting out this last season. This was while he took a mental health break. He was not around the facility, but still bet on his current NFL team. And now I believe he got suspended for 1 year and will lose $11 million on his paycheck. What are the details, and what do you guys think about that whole situation? Modern day Pete Rose, but as a player, not a manager. And Pete Rose bet for his team. Ridley, didn't he bet against him on one of them?
He bet for his team, I think.
He bet for his team as well. It doesn't matter. The only other detail that came out of the NFL investigation on this is that it wasn't insider information. So they went in and they cleaned that, whatever that actually means. And I, for one, don't think that these are the only bets that he placed. I think that he absolutely needs to be made an example of to the rest of the league, because this is a new thing with sports gambling coming into play. And we've all sat in, whether as students or in jobs, we've all sat in on meetings and had to go through PowerPoints and orientation. And yeah, we're told all of these things. The NFL is coming down and just delivering an overly heavily handed slap on this offense, basically to say hey, this is going to cut into the gravy train. If we have, the most important thing about sports gambling is that we, the betting public, if we participate, are accepting that these games are all fair. And when you can't have players, coaches, staff members, you can't have anybody connected to these games actually wagering on games, because then that calls into account the integrity of the game. So even though technically speaking, no insider information was utilized on Calvin Ridley's part, he had no connection to the team in making these bets, it's absolutely the right move that he's suspended for the entire year. And for him to come out and tweet after this comes out, I only bet $1,500. I don't have a gambling problem. It's correction, you bet $11 million and $1,500.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big thing. I mean, it's so black and white. It's in the rules. It's collectively bargained. Players, teams, league, everybody is for making sure the games are fair. So he absolutely deserved this suspension, and just a really, really boneheaded move. Glad that it's not overly more, though. The NFL, I think, definitely could have taken additional steps if they wanted to, suspended him just indefinitely. I think it's kind of generous that they say, we're sidelining you for 1 year and then you can come back. I think kind of acknowledging we're getting used to this a little bit, young, dumb player type of thing, making that sort of mistake, perhaps.
Sure.
So that's kind of where things sit with me, where it's just it's a really dumb decision, and you got popped for it pretty good.
Yeah, he did. It's not ideal for him. I'm not sure why he was doing that. And I don't even think he won. So
he was placing parlays, and you know how parlays work, Drew.
Yeah.
No, I think he won them.
Win parlays.
No, I think he won them. It was a 3 of 5 and an 8-leg parlay that he won money on. Yeah.
Really? He
Which
won?
one did he win on? The 3, and he probably lost the 5
No,
and 8.
I think I'll have to pull up an article or something. I'm pretty sure he won a 3 of 5 and an 8-leg parlay.
I don't know
that's not
about
what
that.
I heard.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he had to.
Won.
I don't think he was
bet
winning
on the
8-leg
Falcons. They
parlays,
didn't
Tom.
win.
unless he was dropping money lines on every favorite minus 400, I don't see Calvin Ridley winning an 8-leg parlay. I don't think so.
I can look into it. I don't know how much it matters.
It probably doesn't
doesn't.
matter that much. I do think this is an interesting thing because you guys know this. Like, sports betting is very like wide open, and games are so unpredictable. You can be close to the team. You can be in the locker room and bet on your team, and you still will likely lose. Because quite frankly, the way they set the lines, they're roughly 50-50. So I don't really even think insider information actually helps you that much. As you said, he wasn't near even the team. So I don't think there's any shady business as far as that front. However, you did bring up a good point. It's just one of those deals where the league has no tolerance because obviously if there was a guy that was betting and actually was influencing the games, they got to set a hard line. I think the suspension is either just okay or I would have gone a little bit less. I do think the fact that he wasn't in the facility, the fact that he wasn't near the team, the fact that he wasn't playing, obviously nothing was influenced there. So I definitely think he did deserve to get suspended. Whether you go half a season, a full season, those are obviously up for debate. I do think that they wanted to make an example of him, and they certainly did. So they certainly did. I don't know. He can bet on other sports. What are the rules? Is he allowed to go bet on NBA?
I don't know.
Maybe go bet on NBA because
I'd have to
stay away from your own league if you want to bet.
I'd have to see like what the different like
sure
regulations
NBA
are
should
because
be
like
fair game, right?
I mean, it depends. Like if he has friends in the NBA, like that's where it's kind of like interconnected. Like athletes know other athletes, or at least have a better chance of doing so than we, the general public, do. I don't know where the lines get drawn on that one. I would imagine that's okay, but I would think that it's like an unwritten, unofficial rule of like, hey, just don't participate in this sort of thing. Is
And
my
how did that
guess.
news get out? Did the casino send that out to the NFL? What?
It was
That's
an
what I
app.
had heard.
Yeah,
It was an
he
app,
created
yeah.
an account on an app in Florida, and because it was like a Hard Rock app that lasted for less than a month in Florida before they said, nah, no more betting on mobile apps. So yeah, that's the crazy thing. It was only a month, but yeah, they must have saw his name and be like, oh, I've heard of him.
First off, he shouldn't be betting in the first place. But if he's gonna bet, like, drop a little $1,500, give it to like, a family friend, not with that name, and be like, hey, bet for me, instead of putting it in your own name on the internet that is kept trackered. That's the thing about like the mobile apps, that's kept more easily tracked. So yeah, boneheaded move by Calvin Ridley. That was yesterday, I believe, on Monday. We're recording on Tuesday. And then today was the whole Rodgers Wilson deal. So a lot of drama in the NFL the last few days. Definitely makes for good sports talk. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of other sports, college basketball, men's and women's conference tournaments going on. We'll pick the big ones, the power. How many do we have here? Power 6, maybe. So
I think it's 6 in college 7. Hoops.
Yeah, Power 6 we got. So, who wins the Big 12 tournament? We'll just start out.
Yeah. So I just want to say that we're gonna do our March Madness special next week. This is, of course, the conference tournaments. So there's a lot of really good ones. Almost every conference, if not every conference, is pretty wide open. And it speaks of the fact that every Power 6 conference team has at least 3 losses this season. Everyone has at least 3 losses. There's no one who's ever threatening to be undefeated. In fact, I think Murray State has 2 losses in a smaller conference. The only team that had less than 1 game without a win. So really, really crazy. Everyone's had at least 2 losses or more, 3 losses or more in the power conferences. Big 12, obviously upsets can happen. Anyone can win, but we're making picks, and I'm going to go with one of the 2 most likely teams. The classes of the Big 12 have clearly been Kansas and Baylor. Both went 14-4 in conference. Baylor 26-5 overall. Kansas 25-6 overall. Baylor did beat Kansas this season 80-70, but they were at home in that game. Tale of two halves. Baylor looked great in the second half. So totally a toss-up for me. But for the sake of making a pick, I'm going to go go for our former rival Mizzou guys. I'm going to pick Kansas. And I think for two reasons. First off, I like Ochai Agbaji. Agbaji is the best player in the Big 12, one of the best players in the country. 20 points, 5 rebounds a game this season, shooting about 48% from the field, 41% on threes. He is the best player on either of these two teams, and I think he's going to shine through in the conference tournament setting. And I also think the fact that Baylor beat Kansas the first game, in a game where two teams are evenly matched, if you lose the game, it's a little bit easier to make an adjustment. So I think Bill Self is going to get in there and make some adjustments. And Kansas will choke in March as they do in the NCAA tournament. But come conference tournaments, regular season Big 12 play, Kansas is the top dog. Baylor obviously lost those 3 talented perimeter players off last year's team. They probably overachieved a little bit at 26-5. I do think Kansas is going to win the Big 12 conference tournament, but it is obviously wide open, especially between those two teams. Near edge to Kansas. They got the great perimeter to play, and they have a good big guy down low to boot as well.
I'm going to unmute myself first. I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears on this one. I like their defense better than Kansas's defense. So you look at, the Ken Pom rankings, certainly better on that front. And I also like their depth. I like that they have, let me count it up real quick, 1, 2, 3, 4 guys in double digits, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys scoring 6 points or more per game. That's just like if somebody gets injured, if somebody gets into foul trouble, something along those lines, you're not reliant on one big star player. And I think that we see a lot in college basketball that star talent doesn't necessarily matter as much. And this is something that's going to kind of tie in with next week's show, as well as we're going to go over keys to some of our picks. We saw in the NCAA tournament, I know it's now apples and oranges a little bit, but Kevin Durant, outstanding player, of course, future Hall of Famer, out in the first round. So I think in the college game, depth and overall balance is going to matter a little bit more, which is why I like the Bears.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'll take Kansas.
Oh, Drew's going Kansas. All right, Drew's going the same way as me. Drew is the ultimate Mizzou guy that loves to pick Kansas, except for come the tournament. I want to say this. I believe last year in our brackets, I think we all had Kansas out the second round, and I think we were right. Or the third round, technically, but you know what I mean, the second game.
Yeah, we gotta address that too.
Yeah, that is just a shame, the wording and everything. But it's gonna be a good tournament. I think the Big 12 is a very, very even conference. Drew, a whole bunch of other even conferences coming up, huh?
Yeah, how about SEC? Who do you guys have?
Ooh, the SEC is close. Talk about wide open. Obviously, the Big 12 does have a lot of good teams, but if we play this on paper, it really goes down to 2 teams, Kansas and Baylor. The SEC goes down to 4 teams. Listen to this. Auburn in league play, 15-3. Kentucky, 14-4. Tennessee, 14-4. Arkansas, 13-5. Recent win over Kentucky, by the way. So any one of those 4 teams truly can win the tournament. It's one of those where it's almost like 25-25-25. They are so evenly matched. I think Bruce Pearl's done a great job at Auburn. Those guys are playing some incredible basketball. Eric Musselman at Arkansas, the dude has an unbelievable amount of energy. He might be my favorite coach in the country. And I've seen him in person when they played Mizzou a couple years ago. He was a fun coach to watch on the sidelines. Arkansas has won some close games lately. But I'm going to pick Kentucky. I know that's not a very bold pick. I know I'm going blue blood. I know I'm going Coach Cal. But I like Kentucky because of what you said, Tom, balance. Kentucky have balance inside, balance outside. Oscar Tshiebwe is a boss, dropping 27 points, 13 rebounds in their last game against Florida, averaging 17 points and 15 rebounds, shooting 61% from the floor. He's been a difference maker all season. The reason why I think Kentucky's going to win, though, is actually because of their guard play, too. Washington Jr. and Wheeler, the two W's on the wings. They've dealt with injuries this season. They're getting healthy again. Wheeler getting 7 assists a game is one of the top in the country. Washington, the second leading scorer, second leading assist guy on the team. So I look at Coach Cal's experience and great coaching. I look at Sheboy down low. I look at Washington and Wheeler on the guard play. Kentucky, I think, is a team to watch come the NCAA tournament because I think as good as they are, as highly ranked as they are, they might be even better because once those guys are all healthy, which they're getting there, they're going to be dangerous in a tournament with a great point guard and a great big man down low. Give me the Wildcats to win the SEC tournament.
You know how I said that in college basketball, depth and balance can kind of counteract a star player? Well, if you can have both of those things, you're going to find yourself in a pretty good position. I like Coach Cal and the Kentucky Wildcats as well for all the reasons you listed, Common.
Yeah, I like Kentucky too. Moving on to the Big Ten. Common, who do you have?
Well, I'm going to go with the same pick Tom and I had preseason. So if you're not sure, go with your preseason pick. Big Ten is wide open again. 8 teams who are between 11-9 and 15-5 in conference play. But I want to separate the league into 4 teams who I think are the most likely to win. That's Illinois and Wisconsin, both 15-5 atop the conference. And then Purdue at 14-6, right behind. I think the best overall record for Purdue. The other team to watch, though, is Michigan State. Tom Izzo obviously always gets the best out of his team in March. The Spartans already beat Purdue recently, and they split the season's meetings against Wisconsin. So obviously they are capable of winning the Big Ten tournament. Michigan State is. But to me, probably those other top 3 teams are most likely to win. But depth and balance, Tom, is the reason why I'm going to go with Purdue. I like their big guys, and I like their guards. I think they have Jaden Ivey on the perimeter, is a great player. He can drive to the hoop. He can shoot. He can set you up. One of the best players in the country. Sasha Stefanovic is lights out from deep. And then Zach Edey and Travion Williams. They have 2 guys who are down low inside, traditional big men. They can score whenever they need a bucket. Kofi Coburn at Illinois is a big star, averaging 21 points. Johnny Davis for Wisconsin, about 20. Those guys are really good. I think Purdue has a little bit more depth, and I love their guard perimeter ratio. And I think they have the most underrated coach in college basketball history, and Matt Painter. That dude can flat out coach basketball. And I love this speech. They asked him about rankings and player rankings, and he basically told you that it was overrated. It didn't mean that much. You can't look at heart. You can't look at this. You can't look at that when you rank the high school players, etc. I think he's going to have his boys ready. Give me Purdue to win the Big Ten tournament championship and perhaps later on to make the Final Four. I like the Boilermakers. They had all those freshmen and sophomore last year that had the big talent. Now they're sophomores and juniors. Look for some Purdue magic. Boiler up.
I'm going with Purdue as well, though I'm not quite as confident. We've seen a lot in recent history where Purdue tends to fall short of expectations. But, in lacking, take away all of that kind of superstitious side of things. I mean, Jaden Ivey is an NBA prospect. I think I'm seeing him like potentially as a top 5 pick type of thing. And then Travion Williams, of course, is a very talented post player. I'm not as big on Edey, pun intended, because he's 7'3". I think
He's
that if you're a bit
huge.
shorter, he wouldn't be quite the difference maker that we make him out to be. So that's going to be kind of something to watch, kind of going with a more traditional old school double post kind of front court. But I'll go with Purdue, although I'm not terribly confident in it. I think it's really, really wide open.
I want to say I'm not that confident either. I just like sounding fired up and sounding convincing, but I think it is obviously wide open in the Big Ten, as are all these conference tournaments.
Yeah, I'll take Illinois for Kofi Coburn.
That's a big dude who can play. He's got the size and the skill. Speaking of NBA prospects, that dude can ball. Former teammate of Ayo Dosunmu. By the way, Tom, I hate to tell you I told you so, but I told you Ayo Dosunmu was going to be a rotational player, a solid a bench player and a spot starter when injuries happen, which unfortunately the Bulls have had a lot of. But IU's doing pretty good, as I told you. Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
All right, how about the Big East? Who do you have?
Big East on paper again goes down the two teams. Providence winning the regular season championship. How about that? No one would have had Providence winning that. They were 14-3. Nova was 16-4. Providence was 13-13 last year. Ed Cooley has coached up his team. Unbelievable mark. They won the conference. The one argument to be made for Nova was that they did beat Providence twice, but you guys know how hard it is to beat the same team 3 times. And the reason why I like Providence, well, we know these conference tournaments, these NCAA tournaments, it comes down to close games. Providence, 9-2 in games decided by 5 points or less. And that's not even counting a 7-point win over Xavier that was a triple overtime game. So they did lose to Villanova twice, but those were a 5-point loss and I think a 2-point loss. So anytime you get beat that close against a team, third time the adjustment is easy to make. I really, really like them. You talk about balance, Tom. Well, that ball club has 5 players averaging between 9.9 and 13.7 points per game, 3 between 12.9 and 13.7. So pretty much anyone is capable of scoring for them. They play really good defense and they come up big in crunch time. Give me Providence to win the Big East.
I'm going to go with Villanova. A big reason I'm not going with Providence, the conference winners, that if you look on KenPom in the luck statistic, Providence is the number 1 luckiest team in the nation. I'm going to go with a little bit more consistency with the snazziest dressed coach that there is, Jay Wright, and the Villanova Wildcats.
So I don't know if you have an answer to this question, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
How in the world do they determine you as the luckiest team in KenPom? How do they determine that ranking?
Let's see. Well, if I click on that tab, it's not giving me anything. I think it's a combination of how you're performing in close games and basically how. I think it just comes down to the number of close games in which you play, and I'm sure that there's some mathematical formula behind it. I don't subscribe to KenPom, so I don't get the behind the scenes on that.
Okay.
I just know that considered a very, very lucky team. So the results are there as far as the wins and loss column, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the truest indication of how good that team might be.
Well, obviously, I respectfully disagree because I think part of winning a conference championship is being good in close games. Call it lucky if you will. I call it clutch and consistent come the end of games. So give me Providence. Nova obviously has a really good shot as well, though.
Yeah, give me Nova to win the Big East tournament.
All right, cool.
Pac-12, out west. Who do you have, Common?
I'm going to go with a little upset in the Pac-12. I know I sort of went with Providence, a small upset. I guess Villanova maybe a slight favorite there. But I'm going to go with a little bit more of a true upset. It's not a terribly bold pick. It's not a major upset. But Arizona at 18-2 in league play, 28-3 overall. I think they're ranked 2nd in the country. They've got to be the favorite going into the Pac-12 tournament. But I have a feeling here. Sometimes you make these picks on feeling. I'm going to go with UCLA. UCLA is the 2nd seed. They're 15-5, 23-6 overall. This is the same UCLA team that split the season's regular meetings against Arizona. Also, more importantly, the same UCLA team that was in the Final Four last year, and Gonzaga needed a half-court buzzer beater to beat them. So this team has almost everybody back. Jaquez, Campbell, Juzang, all those guys are back. And I think they're going to use that experience that they had late in the season last year, and they're going to apply it to a tournament setting. By the way, they were a low seed last year in the tournament, so maybe they wait till March to get going. They're playing good basketball of late. They've won 3 straight, 6 of the last 7. I really like their big man, their big star. He's a guard, but Johnny Juzang is a great player. He's going to lead them in the tournament. They're going to win the conference title. Give me UCLA with a small upset against Arizona to win the Pac-12 conference tournament title.
Now, so really quickly, I looked it up, and now it's on a different tab. The luck ranking. So it's defined as a deviation between the team's actual winning percentage and what one would expect from its game-by-game efficiency. So basically, if you have a team that's playing a lot of close games, they should not win all or like most or very few of them. They should be kind of in the middle. So if you're skewing one way or the other, that's part of the luck calculation. There's more math behind it, but that's just kind of like a rough explanation on that. I'll go with the Arizona Wildcats. Looking at them, they seem pretty complete across the board. So I was on the fence, as you guys saw, as we made our picks. I started at UCLA, changed it to Arizona. I think I'm feeling a little bit better about them right now.
And I'll tell you this, just to reference that question, the luck statistic, makes me think of Butler. I don't know if you remember with Brad Stevens, the former Celtics head coach. Now I believe he's like a general manager or something for them. He had those Butler teams with Gordon Hayward and post-Gordon Hayward making the Final Four twice. They weren't scoring a ton of points. They weren't blowing you out. It seemed like they always win the close game, except for when Hayward's shot went off the rim. That would have been the greatest shot in college history in that close loss against Duke. But makes me think of that Butler team, which, again, who's to say Providence can't make a run? You better be lucky than good, as they say. So that's definitely a good one to keep in mind. Drew, what do you got? I think we have one more conference still to do as well.
Yeah, I've got the Bruins. Moving on to the ACC. Who do you have, Duke?
I do have Duke. So Duke is the most talented team. They had the best record, the highest ranking. They won the regular season conference championship. I think this is sort of like Coach K's swan song. This will be his last conference tournament unless something drastic happens. But Coach K has said he's going to retire. Obviously, an older guy. I seem to believe him. So I think he's going to go out on top. Fitting if they win the regular season title, win the conference title. And I think that loss against UNC in Coach K's last game, that's going to wake him up a little bit. But I would definitely like to see a Duke-UNC rematch. But I'm going to pick Duke, I think the most talented team in the ACC to win the conference championship.
I thought it was kind of funny that North Carolina was able to win that game against Duke.
How
just
so?
like the last game. Well, just like it's the last game. There's all this pageantry. Everybody's, raising the laurels. All these plaudits for Coach K, and then his arch rival comes in and beats him by like double digits, and everyone just at the end of the game is like, "That's not at all how this story is supposed to go."
Sure, and people spent like more money than the average Super Bowl over the last like 15 years. Like tickets were going for like over $5,000 on average. So imagine being a Duke alum who spent a lot of money to go watch Coach K lose to UNC. Now that's a heartbreaker. That is a heartbreaker for a Duke fan. Coach K's last regular season game losing against the arch rival UNC. That is tough. I'm more of a casual UNC fan, Tom. I haven't really watched this new team as much. I like UNC simply because MJ went there. So that's why I've sort of liked the fanhood. I really like that Ty Lawson, Tyler Hansborough team back in the day. But I kind of enjoyed it, even though I like and respect Coach K. I thought that was kind of a cool storyline. I do think it's going to wake up Duke, though. I think they'll wake up and play better in the conference tournament.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you love Duke with Zion, by the way. You love Duke with Zion.
I love Zion. I thought Zion was one of the best college players I've ever seen. And he could be very good in the NBA if he's healthy. We'll see what happens with him there. He has been really good, by the way, when he's been healthy.
Fair enough. Well, we'll get to the NBA in a minute. I've got Duke as well. And, we've run through all six. So let's talk NBA. I know we talked about the MVP last week. Talk about it again, but we'll talk about it again. But what about the scoring champ? Embiid at 29.7 points per game, LeBron 29.4, and Giannis 29.2. Common, who do you think ends up as this season's scoring champion?
Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting topic because, when it gets closer after the season ends, we will talk MVP. That race is wide open, but the scoring championship race, we have three excellent scorers who can all win that race. I'm going to go with LeBron James here. LeBron James, I think, coming off a 56-point game. Count them. 56 points against the Warriors. King James, alive and well. I think Giannis and Embiid play with better teammates. They'll be asked to carry the load less. And you better believe LeBron's going to want to make a statement. The Lakers obviously are not great right now. Realistically, not a championship level team. They should get in the play-in game, but that's not even guaranteed. So I think LeBron's going to go out and make a statement there. I think he's going to put up a lot of points. And quite frankly, he's going to have to get him in the play-in game. I mean, you see what happens when he doesn't play? They just lost to the Spurs. By the way, we'll have more on Popovich's record-tying win, but the Spurs have been horrible this season. Absolutely horrendous. And the Lakers couldn't beat them without LeBron James. So I think it'll be between LeBron and Embiid. I think Giannis, as amazing as he is, Giannis has a lot of other good scorers on his team, a lot of other good players. He probably plays on the best overall, deepest team. The James Harden and Embiid situation is interesting because Harden's going to take more shots, but he's also going to get more assists and allow less double teams for Embiid because Embiid's scoring average has actually gone up since Harden joined the team. It'll be interesting to see if that happens long term, but I think that it'll be between LeBron and Embiid because I think they have the most to prove. I think Embiid wants that scoring title just to make his MVP resume look even better because that man Jokic is killing out there right now. Meanwhile, I think LeBron just wants to say, hey, man, I'm 37 years old. I can lead the league in scoring at 37, something that I don't think ever has been done. So I'll give a slight edge to LeBron because I think he's gonna need to put up more points and take more shots just to get his team not even in the playoffs, in the play-in game.
And I like Embiid for the scoring title as well. Well, not as well. Opposite of LeBron James, simply because it's a two-man game with him and Harden. You know, Harden more than happy to facilitate and share. Harden, who actually has 3 scoring titles himself. I think that's going to play a little bit into the motivation as well. He knows at least the aesthetical importance of having that title. So I think he'll be playing into it as well. And quite frankly, I think LeBron would be well served if he kind of relied on 2-time scoring champion Russell Westbrook to kind of help carry the load a little bit more. I think that could be he's won 2 scoring titles, though. I think that could be a really 40%. Big part of.
He's going to the bench, or the rumors. Those are the rumors. They want to rely less on him. Take him to the bench. Send him to the bench, Vogel.
He might be better served being that second unit guy at this point in his career. You know, like he's like, I think he's having a sharp drop off because his body type and his game don't necessarily age well. That super explosive, athletic play from a 6'3" guard. Like he's played a lot of years with a lot of aggression in his game. That might be wearing him down a little bit. So he might be more effective in more limited bursts. But I think Embiid winning the title. I disagree
about that, by the way, because I think Westbrook is near the level he's always been. It's just being called into effect. If you look at his field goal percentages, turnovers, etc., it's pretty close to where it's always been. It's just a matter of he's not getting as much usage because he has LeBron and Davis on his team, and obviously that makes him look worse. But again, I respectfully completely disagree about Westbrook, but I won't make this a very long argument. What do you think about the scoring title, Drew?
Give me Embiid. He's number 1 right now by 0.3. So I think he keeps it up the rest of the season.
Okay. Not much to go. Like 5 weeks left in the season, I think, roughly.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun.
Moving on, Greg Popovich ties Don Nelson for the most NBA coaching wins. Guys, where does he rank all time on the best coaching list? Top 5, top 3, number 1?
So he's definitely in the top 5. He is either 3rd or 4th. And this is where it's an interesting debate, and it obviously matters what happens the rest of his career. So first off, Pop has 5 rings. Phil Jackson has 5. Oh, I don't want 2 hands, not enough. I need a 3rd hand to count them. 11 rings for Phil Jackson. So he is without question number 1. Red Auerbach has 9, so I can get it in 2 hands. But 9 rings for Red Auerbach. Mr. Popovich has 5 rings. So he's number 1 all-time in career regular season wins. He's currently third in career playoff wins, one behind Pat Riley. So Phil Jackson is first in playoff wins, obviously, with those 11 rings. So there's the only other coaches to have 5 rings matching Popovich are John Kundal. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that right. And then obviously Pat Riley, as I mentioned. Riley has one more postseason win. We'll see if Pop actually gets in the postseason again with that terrible Spurs roster. And then they both have 5 rings each. Pop has more regular season wins than Riley, but their careers are pretty even. They've both coached a lot of great players: Duncan, Robinson, Ginobili, Parker, and then for Pat Riley, obviously coached Magic Johnson earlier in his career. Coached Patrick Ewing with the Knicks as well. So the argument to be made for Pat Riley, he also was the coach on the Heat at one point. I think he was the coach with that D-Wade and Shaq ring, I believe. So Riley's done his success with different teams, the Heat, the Knicks, and the Lakers. So you can have an argument for him saying that he can succeed in any situation. The argument for Popovich would be that he's done it with one franchise, that consistency. Obviously, the Spurs were not near the winning team before he took over. So it's hard to say between Pop and Riley. They're pretty even for me at third place right now. But obviously with his accolades, he's got to be at the worst third place, at the very worst. Or fourth place, excuse me, at the very worst.
Yeah, I have him as a second best coach all time behind Phil Jackson. Yeah, because if you look at where the NBA was with Red Auerbach when he was coaching, you didn't have free agency. You had a lot of players that kind of arrive in one place and then stay there their entire careers.
Sure.
And when you look at what Popovich was able to do with the Spurs, as far as, like you said, not really a successful franchise before he was the head coach. I mean, if you look at, you had like the tail end of David Robinson's career. You had all of Tim Duncan. And then you've got a mid to late first round pick in Tony Parker and a second round pick in Manu Ginobili as the next 2 best important players to that franchise. They had, Kawhi Leonard for a hot minute when they drafted him. Again, middle of the first round. So proven development there with a superstar player. So if you want to do the whole who's a better coach as far as getting less or getting more with less type of thing, I think he also, an important part of coaching is able to manage egos. That's why Phil Jackson's number 1, because the NBA, probably more so than any sport, it's a players first league. So Phil Jackson obviously able to do that with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, and then Horace Grant with the first three-peat.
Shaq and Kobe.
We saw in the First Dance what Phil had to work with. And if anything, I really wanted to hear more of what Phil Jackson had to say. But I think Greg Popovich, to his credit, has the right superstar with Tim Duncan to buy into the whole team first mentality. But then being able to get these guys to work together and not get too big for their britches and have sustained success in San Antonio, Texas, when you're going up. When you think about it, Los Angeles, even within the state, Dallas and Houston, bigger markets, ostensibly more popular teams. And he was able to have success with that franchise, and to a lesser extent still does. We have to see where the current iteration of the Spurs goes, if they're ever able to get back to that point. But that's why I have Popovich number 2, simply different era from Red Auerbach, where he wasn't able to just kind of glom onto all the top talent, Hall of Fame talent, and what he was able to do with developing guys.
Yeah, I think he's definitely in the top 5 for sure.
So real quick to your point, Tom, obviously Greg Popovich does a good job of developing his players. There's no argument against that. I will say this, though. Manu Ginobili, part of it was Pop, but Manu Ginobili was an incredible player, and we saw that in the Olympics when he smoked Team USA in the 2004 Olympics in the semifinals of the Olympic round. I think Manu Ginobili was a phenomenal player. Obviously, anyone can be aided by a great coach, but I think Manu Ginobili was going to do what he does even if someone else was his coach. Tony Parker as well, a great player. So part of those guys, I would argue, yes, in part Pop, but a lot of it is that those guys were just undervalued draft picks. Just my take on those guys.
Well, and that's part of it too, is that Popovich kind of not really led. That's kind of like there were obviously really great European players and other, I know Ginobili's from Argentina.
Foreign-based players.
Like foreign-based players. Like he was really probably one of the top guys to say, like, no, you can build a team. It doesn't have to be, USA-born guys, because there's also like Boris Diaw did really, really great for them. I mean, you look at Thiago Splitter from Spain. I'm blanking. Like there's Fabricio. I'm blanking on his name. But anyway, like multiple guys. So like that's part of it too, is him seeing that market inefficiency and saying, well, I can coach these guys because they know basketball, even if they're not from here.
Yeah, and interesting to say that in that championship that they won against the Heat the first time, where it was LeBron and Wade, I know we have Steph Curry and all, but they won with a lot of three-point shooting. So he went from having Tim Duncan, David Robinson down low. He adjusted his game as a coach to a three-point shooting team later on. The argument against him would be that, he actually has struggled right now, and it shows you as great of a coach as he is. The NBA in particular and sports as a whole are player-driven sports. There's no coach that can win a ring without great players. And the flip argument I can say, and I don't know if this is him getting older or more of a coincidence, but DeMar DeRozan actually had his worst seasons in San Antonio, and now he's doing better with the Bulls. I don't know. Again, it's hard to speculate everything that goes on. And you bring up a good point about Red Auerbach. He did have the best players. Bill Russell, John Havlicek, or I think Havlicek was on those teams. Bob Cousy, a bunch of all-time great players. Certainly made it a lot easier for him. So players do matter. It's very hard comparing eras. So comparing a guy like him and Pop is very hard. I don't necessarily have an argument that will say for sure, though. I'm okay with him being number 2. I still do think 9 rings is a lot. But Phil Jackson, to me, is definitely number 1 because before Phil took over the Bulls, as good as MJ and Scotty were, they had 0 rings in several tries. Shaq and Kobe had been together for a little bit as well. 0 rings until Phil took over. Shaq left. Kobe on by himself without Shaq. 0 rings until Phil Jackson came back. So Phil is definitely number 1. Pop is definitely in that 2 to 4 range. Definitely respect what he's done as a coach on a great career. I wish he'd be a little bit nicer to the media, though. I am sick of his tricks and his rudeness, but you know what? Nobody's perfect.
Oh, move on to locks of the week. Common, how did we do last week?
We had an absolute shock in last week's locks of the week. I'm on the floor here in utter dismay. I cannot believe what happened in locks of the week. Maybe for the first time in our new setup, Drew Brackett was 0-3. Locks of the week champion. This guy has been getting locks left and right. Clearly, I put the jinx on him because I hyped him up and said he was the best betting locks expert out there. So clearly the jinx is on. Drew Brackett, your mojo was way off for feels like the first time all year, Drew. I don't remember you having an 0-3 week. You're still, let's see, 11 games over 500, but 0-3 last week. You had Blues Rangers under 5.5 goals in hockey. Missed that one pretty badly. 5-3, 8 total goals. And your EPL soccer over-unders both missed. Southampton, West Ham United under 2.5. It was 3-1, 4 total goals. Burnley, Chelsea under 2.5. I believe it was 4-0 there. So you missed both of those. Tom, you were 1-2. You had Warriors -3 at the T-Wolves. Wrong there. T-Wolves winning 129-114. Purdue -3 at Wisconsin. Wisconsin winning by 3 instead. And you did get the Spencer Dinwiddie over 18.5 points, rebounds, assists, 14 points, 9 assists, 1 rebound. Easily got that one. And how about this? So the season standings are Drew in first, Tom in second, Common in third. For this week, I was in first, Tom was in second, Drew was in third. The rankings completely flipped. I was 2-1, Lakers plus 5.5 against the Mavs. Whew, I got that one barely. Mavs winning 109-104. That line moved to 4.5 at close. So I got that point at the right time when we recorded. I missed that Warriors game against the T-Wolves, and I did have Clippers Rockets under 227.5. I was correct, only 213 points, 113-110, the Clippers, the final. So winning week for me. Hopefully I keep it rolling. Let's go to the former Locks champion. We'll see what's going on. Is Drew going to cool off, or was this simply a statistical anomaly this last 0-3 week? Let's find out.
Yes. I'll take the Thunder plus 13.5 over the Bucks tonight.
Okay.
That's NBA. And then we'll go to the EPL. Well, March 10th, Southampton versus Newcastle United under 2.5 goals. And then on the 13th, West Ham United, Aston Villa under 2.5 as well.
Okay. Tom, what do you got?
March Madness is in the air, so I am going with,
I knew it.
Double check to make sure. Yes, I'm going with an all NCAA card.
Oh, good.
Tonight, Utah Valley minus 12 against Chicago State. And then tomorrow night, March 9th, give me Navy plus 6.5. I have them winning outright on a number of places. The Jerome being one of them. I think our conference picks as well. So give me Navy plus 6.5. And then also tomorrow night on March 9th, Vermont Binghamton under 135.5. Their previous matchup totals were 133 and 115. So I feel pretty confident on the under in whichever conference championship in the American East. I think semifinals. American East semifinals.
Castleman. Yeah, America East. Yes.
Got to go with the Catamounts on that one. But yeah, under 135.5.
All right.
And when they win the America East, because they're very, very good, it will be a very popular upset pick. They'll probably be 12 seed, I think, maybe 13. I mean, they're 26-5 on the year. Very popular upset pick when they make it to the tournament.
Absolutely. Okay. I looked at the line on that one, but it was minus 20. So I was just like, I'll go for the total.
Okay, there you go. Minus 20. Well, I bet you that doesn't cover because it sounds like a big line. I bet you the under hits because it's the America East. Probably the Chicago State pick will hit. Chicago State is one of the worst college basketball teams I've ever seen.
Much improved this year, Mr. Enchev.
Okay,
improved this year.
I saw them against Mizzou a couple years ago, and they made Mizzou look like the 96 Bulls. So maybe they've improved. Maybe I'm wrong, but Chicago State is not good at basketball.
No, they're 3-15 in the WAC. Usually they're about over. No.
I rest my case.
Much improved team.
I think they're roughly 500 ATS. So that's the thing that has me worried.
All right, against the spread, roughly 500.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, well, hey, I do have some against the spread statistics. Get this, and this will back up Drew's point, so it makes me feel better about this pick. And Drew, how about this? I'll even give you a half point because I just checked my DraftKings. I found the Thunder at plus 14 against the Bucks. You had them 13.5. I'll give you half a point.
Sure.
So Thunder plus 14 versus the Bucks. Tom, Thunder are 16-7-1 against the spread this season when they're double-digit underdogs, covering 70% of the time as double-digit underdogs. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, young, talented players. You know what that means. Those guys are going to play hard. The Bucks, meanwhile, they're the better team. They're going to win the game. They probably won't be as motivated as those young guys. What I love about a young team, they're going to play hard. The talent differential is obviously pretty big. The Bucks should win the game, but 14 points is a lot of points. So give me the Thunder plus 14 against the Bucks. Went with the stats on that one. I'm going to go with a little heart and feeling on this next pick. I'm going to go Warriors minus 6 over the Clippers. Still no Draymond Green, but guess what? Klay Thompson expected to play tonight against the Clippers. Either way, I think Curry's got a big game in this one. Warriors have too much talent to be losing 5 games in a row. Depleted Clippers team. I know Golden State has its own injuries, but They've got a lot more talent on the court in this game. -6. I mean, Curry's known to tear up the Clippers. Give me Warriors -6 over the Clippers. And I'm going to stay in this game and take the over. Give me Warriors Clippers over 223.5 points. The last 4 Warrior totals have gone over that. So no Draymond to play that tough defense. Look for a lot of tempo. Look for a lot of points. 224 points between the Warriors and Clippers or more should not be a problem.
Love it.
All right.
We'll see what happens. Trivia. What do you guys have?
So for the first time ever, I don't have a trivia question. I was busy at work. I got my show research right before we started. So do not have a trivia question for the first time ever. But thankfully, Tom does have a trivia question for us.
I've got 2. One kind of ties into a story that I heard just really tickled me. So we'll start with the straight up and down trivia question. Russell Wilson, obviously on the move from Seattle to Denver to play for the Broncos. Can you tell me which MLB team drafted Russell Wilson?
The Yankees.
Rockies.
Nope.
The Yankees.
Rockies.
Oh, Rockies. Drew has it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
There you go, Drew.
I thought you both said Yankees at the same
Full
time.
circle.
So yeah.
Didn't he
full
play
circle.
for the Yankees in the minors or something?
It may
Like
have
not
just
in the
been
minors,
spring
in spring training, excuse
Yeah.
me. He had a spring training at bat for the Yankees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, drafted in the 4th round. And then, Drew, you mentioned earlier in the show, and this is what reminded me of the story, family winning out over football or over profession for Tom Brady. I'll tell you how it's connected in a minute, but can you tell me what other sports icon was in the running for the George Foreman grill? So this is obviously before it was the George Foreman grill. Who is the other sports icon? I'll give a hint
Muhammad
that
Ali.
it was in the 80s and it was not in boxing. Although you're in the ballpark, kind of, sort of.
Jim
Or in
Brown.
in the theater, I should say.
Jim
more
Brown.
accurately. No. Some people might not consider this an actual sport. There's a lot of athletic ability, but a lot of the outcomes are already decided by the time
WWE.
Mm-hmm.
Andre the Giant.
Closer.
Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan was the other player not player, but other icon in the running for the George Foreman grill. I heard the story that if you look up Hulk Hogan, his net worth, $25 million. And the reason, and this all ties in with Drew family winning out, evidently there's a story that Hulk Hogan was telling that his kids were like getting really aggravated with him because he was always late to pick them up from school. So he says, you know what? Today, instead of getting there at 3:30, I'm going to be at the front of the line in front of all the soccer moms, gets there at 2:30, picks up the kids. They're ecstatic. They're so happy to see him. Gets home. He has a voicemail from his agent saying, hey, Hulk, give me a call. I've got a grill and I have a blender, and it's between you and George Foreman for who gets what. Hulk Hogan calls his agent back as soon as he can. Agent says, Foreman already got the grill. You get the blender. And here we are. Hulk Hogan, $25 million net worth. Do you want to take a stab at what George Foreman's net worth is?
$27 million.
Oh, no. It's got to be $300 million.
$300 million.
Yeah.
Oh my
I'll take
God.
So you put in the effort to be a good parent, cost you $275 million.
Oh my God. At least he lost it for family, unlike Calvin Ridley losing it for sports bets. So at least he lost his money on family. That is an awesome story, Tom. I like
That's
that.
well done. That's well done.
That's a
well
fantastic
done.
one.
Best trivia question yet. Tom Castleman wins the award. And it's figures because Tom loves contracts and money talk, and he loves storylines. So that was perfect for Tom Castleman. All right, salutes and statements of the week. Tough to follow that last one, but what do we have? Let me guess, Drew. Watch the conference tournaments and fill out your brackets this weekend.
I was just going to choose not to follow it. I'll have somebody else follow it.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's me then. So I got that tough shoe to follow, Tom. So here's my statement of the week. This is a little controversial. Tom will not like this,
Oh
but
boy.
this is something that's been on my mind for about the last 10 years. This is something that I go back and forth in my head and I reason it out. No, it's this guy. No, it's that guy. And, the more I think about it, I'm going to say this. If he already isn't, LeBron will go down as the greatest basketball player of all time. Now, I'm not saying the best player in his prime. I think prime Michael Jordan to me is still the best, but prime LeBron is not far off of him. And if we're talking about the single greatest player ever of all time, you do have to take the whole career into perspective. And I think what LeBron is doing this season is one of the most underrated seasons in sports history, and it's lost in the losing the Lakers are doing. But 37-year-old LeBron James averaging 29.4 points per game, 52% shooting, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 1.5 steals. He's above his career average in points, a little bit under in assists, above in rebounds. When MJ was 37, he was retired. When he was 38, he was at 23 a game. 20 the year after that, shooting in the low to mid 40% in those 2 seasons. LeBron doesn't look like he's slowing down. So sure, the prime of MJ's career, I know MJ was unstoppable. He's this mythical force. I think Jordan's unbelievably great, but the sheer amount of years LeBron has done it at, and the sheer amount of years I think he's going to continue to do it at, because I think he is not slowing down. Watching LeBron this weekend against the Warriors, he looks like LeBron James, throwing down dunks. He's even better at threes. I mean, got better at his free throws too. I mean, he is making adjustments. He's dominating the game. So, I know I'm a Bulls fan. I'm a Chicago fan. I know MJ's this mythical force. But to me, if we're looking at entire careers, LeBron James is my GOAT for the entire career. Any comments, Tom? Care to disagree?
Yeah, but it kind of gets onto like semantics, so it's not really a super duper worthwhile argument to make.
So you're gonna give me the 6-0 championship rings stuff and all that?
I'm going to give that there is a difference between best and great.
Okay.
That's what I would parse it as. Like LeBron James is pretty much like the ultimate best basketball player that you could construct.
Sure.
But if we're talking about like the peak greatness, the myth, and the overall like accomplishment of like the heroes are like they're just such different players that like you have Michael Jordan overcoming everything to dominate pretty much an entire decade. Whereas LeBron James basically like shaped it, if that makes sense. Like Michael overcame his environment, LeBron shaped his environment.
Sure.
So like that's why I think it's kind of like different to look at them and say that like it'd be a lot easier, for example, if LeBron stayed in Cleveland his entire career, because then at least like it's like, oh, we can kind of compare the two of them that way. Like the way that he's kind of brought about player agency and all these guys that do the 2-year deals with the second year being an option. So in effect, you're just signing a 1-year deal that you have a backup in case you get injured. Like, yeah, like I won't like out of hand disagree with that argument. It's just like the different impacts of the game that they had. Like Michael made it global for like a fan perspective. Sure. And LeBron like obviously carried that on, but he also like really lifted up player agency as well, if that makes sense.
And LeBron definitely did influence the super team, but let's not forget, I mean, there's been, you look at the Celtics got together. I mean, obviously in Jordan's era, free agency was not the same. Contracts were not the same.
Right.
It's not just LeBron. He obviously made a big influence on it, just like Steph Curry made a big influence on the 3-point shot, but it's just a different era. And the one thing I hate about that argument, well, LeBron had to leave his team to go win. Well, it's a different era. Free agency is different these days, and Cleveland was really, really bad. I mean, who's to say if MJ was in this modern-day era and the Bulls never got a Muscati, does he go out and leave a different team? I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. It's just hard to play that guessing game, but I hate that the fact that LeBron didn't play in Cleveland his whole career, I hate that gets used against him in that argument. And I agree with you. Jordan has that aura, that it factor, and maybe his dominance over one decade was greater. But when I look at the greatest of all time, I take all of time, all seasons into effect. And I look at it this way. MJ dominated one decade. LeBron is now dominating 2 decades, pretty much. He's right. He's going on decade 2, about to wrap up 20 years in the National Basketball Association. It is really impressive what he's doing at this age. I know modern day medicine and all that has helped him. But at the same time, though, he's also played in the NBA since high school. You play more games, you travel more in the NBA. He's played more Olympic basketball than Jordan did. So the sheer amount of toll his body has had, even with the modern day advances, is unbelievable, because LeBron plays in the finals almost every year. Then he plays Olympics a lot of years, no longer anymore. But I got to give him credit for what he's done with all that he's played. But that's a debate that will rage on forever. But I'm kind of starting to move on more into the LeBron side of things. I was like more Jordan, then I was more even, and now I'm looking at more LeBron. And that's because winning is a team game, and I want to make this debate now when the Lakers are doing so bad, because it's easy to make that debate if LeBron wins another ring or two. But I want to make that debate now before he wins that ring. If he does win another one, we'll see.
Absolutely. Well, for me, my salute, as you mentioned, coming earlier, International Women's Day. Salute to Doris Burke, re-signing with ESPN through 2024 and 2025. Going to continue calling games for ABC and ESPN, as well as calling the NBA Finals on ESPN Radio. So quick salute to her. And then, March Madness is coming up. We saw a great buzzer beater. Not the way I wanted it to go with Chattanooga over Furman, but what this kind of comes down to for my statement is that, Common, you made mention of, made light of the first 4 being like the first round and how it's all messed up with that. The 16 seed teams do not deserve or should not be subjected to a play-in game for their spot. They won their conference tournament. They should have the same shot that UMBC did as a 1 seed versus a 16 seed. They should have the full-fledged March Madness experience. Yes, it's a more competitive game if they're playing another team that is of a similar quality of player, of coaching, of just resources in general. But, they deserve to be dancing, quite frankly, in the main stage with the other 68 teams. And then, I think it's either eliminate 2 of those playing games, eliminate those 16s altogether, or just make a couple of the 12 seeds and then a couple of the 11 seeds the set of play-in games where you're having bigger programs coming in, bigger programs that have that last, extra credit, so to speak, session to make that final grade, to make it to the tournament. Equally compelling basketball, a little bit more brand recognition, and I think just more fairly represents these different schools and what they accomplished relative to their expectations. So do away with the 16 teams playing in, move everybody up a little bit, and then just have, the last 4 first 4 out or last 4 in, some sort of play-in with those teams.
Yeah, I've never liked the playing games. So the 16 seeds have it the worst, as you mentioned, Tom. Obviously, it doesn't feel like the tournament. It doesn't even count on your bracket, because you could pick one or the other team. And it's like that Thursday tip-off that I'm so used to. The brackets get rolling. I mean, people don't care about the playing games. It's not the same feel because we can't see an upset in the playing games. It's 2 12 seeds, 2 16 seeds. I don't know if they do 11 seeds or whatever, but 11 seeds.
It's 11 to 16, yeah.
Yeah, it just includes 11s and 16s, as you mentioned. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the tournament. I can't get into it on a Tuesday. I wait till Thursday to get into it. So I agree. I guess the one argument to be made for keeping it would be having those like 11 seeds, kind of go at it. Could be a dramatic game, but
and they've had success. The 11 seeds have had success.
I know, UCLA, right?
UCLA. I think Syracuse made it far one year.
Yep.
I mean, I'd have to look back at the brackets, but usually that 11 seed who wins the play-in game, they can win a few games in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you can maybe more of an argument make for those, but I kind of agree with Tom. The 16 seeds should get a chance to play that big school, that big player, that big name recognition. I mean, imagine being a 16-seeded player and you're playing a guy that goes on to play in the NBA, and then you have your kids 6-7 years later, you have that story of saying, look, I guarded so-and-so in the first round of March Madness. Instead, you're playing some other guy in a 16 seed that's never going to get to play in the NBA. And it's different.
I played the guy that played the guy that played in the NBA.
Right, exactly. So it's just, I agree with you 100%, Tom. Maybe cut out the 16 seed games. Maybe do 2 11s, 2 12s. I don't know. Or just go back to 64. I just feel like that's a good even number. That's something that worked for me before because I've never been into those playing games. So we'll see what happens. But I think that'll do it for the show, unless you have anything to add, Drew. Nothing to add? Okay, well, hey, that'll do it for the show. We'll have our March Madness special next week. We'll break down all the brackets. We'll make our picks with Drew Bracketology and more. We'll have our upset teams, Cinderella teams, Final Four, national championship, and more. So definitely try and watch some college hoops this weekend and read up and, brush up on your brackets. We'll have all the updates on our show. Have a great day. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you next week.